Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
Welcome to Launch Code. We are here in Las Vegas for SHOT Show, and our guest is Josh Kinser, Army vet. He's with Big and J and Swagger Bipods, and my co-host this wonderful evening is Paul Bork from Drift Media. And Josh, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
So you have a different story. Most of the people that I get to talk to, am lucky enough to talk to, went the mill route and then got out and went into business. You actually enlisted when you were 26 and worked in marketing prior to enlisting.
Yeah, I had some good experiences. I got to work in marketing, advertising, and branding, and it just so happened right towards the end, we got switched from a business to consumer, which is a much more fun thing, to a business to business deal, and I got stuck. I was writing hardwood flooring catalogs. I was trying to come up with like names for 80 different shades of brown, and 9/11 happened, and I just felt left out. And I had buddies that joined after, and I felt like I needed to do something and make a change, and so I ended up quitting everything and joining then. And it was late, and I was the old guy in basic.
So you were 26 in basic training?
Yes.
And I ask a lot of people, common theme is like, the skill set you learned in the military, like how did that transfer into the, civilian, private, world, whatnot. I got to ask, man, did anything in your business career prior to enlisting help you once you enlisted? Like, were any of the skills you learned in marketing, like, did they transfer to boot camp or basic training? I'm sorry. Or like once you were in, like, whatnot? I mean,
I'd say absolutely not.
Fair enough. That's fantastic.
I would say that, there were some things where I had confidence and I had some leadership that, even in basic, these guys were terrified. And you just look at it and you're like, guys, this is a game. You play by the rules and you do what you need to do, and you're gonna survive the game. And I think, that probably helped other people more than it helped me. But
so that's leadership, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some leadership stuff transferred. That's kind of cool.
That could have just been from age, though.
Well, that too. Did you go? So, what year did you graduate high school?
1993.
That's a year before me. And did you go to school, or did you go straight into work?
No, I went to East Tennessee State.
Okay.
And I
What'd you
floundered
study?
around. I went back and forth a little bit. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and I ended up in English, and I focused on copywriting and creative writing because I really enjoyed writing in the sense of like marketing and advertising and kind of speaking to the consumer, and I got to write like radio commercials and do some really fun stuff, and I really did enjoy it. But man, after 9/11, I started watching Black Hawk Down over and over and again. And
I saw that movie. It came out on a Friday night. I watched it Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night.
I probably watched that 11 million times. I mean, it just right then, with everything going on, I just felt that I needed to do something different at that time.
So you went down to the recruiting office?
I did. And the funny thing is, I was like, I'm going to do 18 X-ray and do special forces. And then all of a sudden you get there and you're like, oh man, it's going to be 2.5 years. I'm going to miss the Iraq war. So the guy's like, have you seen Scout? And he shows me this video of what scouts do. And they're riding dune buggies and dirt bikes. And I'm like, oh man, this is it. They got sniper rifles on their back, just riding a dirt bike. Of course you get there. There's no such thing as a dirt bike in the Army. There's no such thing as a dune buggy in the Army. I mean, they don't exist, but they got me into it, and basically I walked my happy ass everywhere I went.
So, basic training, 26 years old. Breezed through that, I guess. Shared some leadership. What year was that?
That was 2003.
2003. And then how long until you deployed?
Well, I tell you, it was funny. I actually signed up. I think in 2002, it was literally like there was such a flux of people coming in. They weren't able to handle it. I mean, it was like a year that I had to wait after I signed up to even be able to get in, which I think speaks to a lot. When I was in the 82nd, I mean, there was a lot of guys like me. One of my good friends, he dropped out of law school. There were stockbrokers that quit, and so we had a lot of guys that were similar to that. And I was just proud of our country at that time that as much as I wanted to get in the fight, that so many people did that.
Right.
That it was going to take me a year to join the Army and get into the fight, because so many people had come together and said, "Hey, man, we're gonna take it to the Taliban and all these other people that want to see us fail."
And then, so get out of basic.
So yeah, get out of basic. It was actually funny. I'd actually signed up to be in the 82nd, and they come to us and said, "Look, there's no airborne slots left. Here are your choices. You can either work for the drill sergeants here and wait for your airborne slot to come up, or you can have duty station of choice." And so I was like, and one of the drill sergeants I was had gotten kind of close to, he had told me, he said, "Look, man, I'll help you get in. You really want to go to combat? I'll help you get into a unit that's going." And he did. He got me to Europe and told me what to do. And as soon as I got in there, I was in Germany for, what did I get there? I think I got there October. And my entire unit was deployed over to Bosnia. They were doing like a peacekeeping mission. They were going to call them back, and we deployed that like February 1st or something like that.
So how long did you spend over there total? How many deployments?
2 deployments. One was a 13 and one was a 15.
And then crazy stuff going on over there.
Yeah.
Very busy.
It was very busy. I mean, I got everything that I asked for.
And got paid to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get dirty, and I wanted to see it, and I wanted to be in the grit, and I got it. And the unfortunate thing is, we saw a lot of guys die, and guys that we were close with, and it was an eventful 2 deployments.
Yeah, and before we started recording, you made some comments about being an English major and palletizing things, and
yeah, I've long since, I like languages. I always like trying to learn different languages. If I go to a country, I try to learn them, and I've always said Army was one of the hardest languages to learn, because it's all acronyms, and then it's just these words that don't make sense. And so, I remember like somebody was like, "Hey, y'all go palletize this." And I'm sitting here thinking like, you palletize it. You don't add IZE to a noun and then make it an adjective. That's not how it works.
You're the only person in the history of the Army that's ever had that thought.
I don't pantize in the morning. I don't pancake eyes, whatever it is. So, there were all those kind of nuances and just learning the different language and learning what people, said. And of course, my thoughts on the matter, when I would say something like that to a 30-year sergeant major vet, he'd just look at me like I was an idiot. But, it's a different language.
And so let me ask you, so how long did you spend in the Army?
Oh, it was right at 9 years. 9 years.
And how old were you when you got out?
Oh gosh, we'd be
36?
Yeah, right at 35,
right.
30.
What was kind of going through your head? So you've been in the workforce, now you're in the military, and it's time to get out of the military. Well, what was going through your head? Did you have any idea what you wanted to do, or how you were going to do it, or like what was your thought process like what went through your head?
So I was as single as I could be at the beginning of it, and I'm glad I did what I did without a family, because a lot of my friends, I mean, we were kicking in doors, and every time I thought, like, man, you got a 3 and a 1-year-old at home. Like, I am so glad that wasn't me. I don't know if I could have handled having kids and being in that situation. And I really didn't care in the beginning. I was first one to be kicking in the door. I volunteered for everything. And then, I met my wife in between deployments, and I suddenly found myself being a lot more careful.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, don't go crawl in that hole. Like, there was a different mindset about it. And I think after I'd re-enlisted the first time, I was really, saying, hey, this is kind of it. Now, I got banged up, and, I nothing bad. I mean, I'm fine now.
You had several IED experiences.
Yeah, I did. And that was the game, during the surge. It was crazy. But, so I got back, I had some surgeries to get out, and really, as we started trying to figure out what we were going to do, I thought, the last time I ended up writing hardwood flooring catalogs, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I have an opportunity right now to do what I want, and I might have to go in. I mean, here I am, like, I'm 30 at this time, going through the surgeries in the transition battalion. I'm like 33, and I ended up interning for free, because the Army had this kind of deal. They were like, look, we want guys to stay out of trouble. They're having trouble with drugs. They're having trouble with all this stuff. But, like, go do a job that you think you're going to transition into and get prepared. Well, so they have this list of jobs, and it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, oh, go work with the K9 unit. Well, they wanted E7s and E6s to go clean dog crap out of cages. Well, that's not going to. So I went to the captain, and I was like, look, I was a writer. I showed him our portfolio, and he was like, okay, yeah. And I actually went to Texas Trophy Hunters, the magazine, and I was like, hey, here's the deal. I can work for you, but I can't get paid, because the Army says the moment I get paid that I take focus off of, surgeries and healing. And they were like, I mean, God, we got a 34-year-old intern. But I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in the hunting industry. I knew what I could do, and I just knew that I had to let my ego push it aside and do some crap work again.
Was that tough? So, like, resetting, basically starting from zero, an unpaid intern, and moving your ego. I mean, you're combat vet, or I don't know, you weren't a vet at the time, but you've seen combat, good bit of it, and now here you are interning at a
so I remember I went in to Horace Gore, who's kind of a Texas legend. He's the editor of Texas Trophy Hunters, and he looked at all my stuff, and he's like, well, yeah, well, how much you need? And, I told him, well, here's the kicker. I got to work for free. And he was like, well, you're hired.
There you go.
Deal.
Tough sell.
And so I'm not going to say that later on Horace and I haven't had some disagreements, but Horace taught me a lot, and I got to work under really an icon in Texas, and somebody that has forgotten more about deer hunting than most people know.
Right.
And now, the funny thing is, that's where I started, and there were some other things that happened in between there, but 7 years later, I'm the vice president of that company. So
the takeaway from that is unpaid intern to vice president of the company
in 7 years,
because you put your ego aside.
Because I put my ego aside, and I knew this is what I want to do. I knew I have the skills to work in this industry, and leadership. I tell you, a lot of people don't realize how much of a void of leadership is out there in industry, business, everything.
In the private sector.
In the private sector, yeah.
That's one of the things, spending so much time around, everybody at Black Rifle is one thing I've learned hanging around with vets is the one thing, in my opinion, that the military has to offer to the civilian world is chain of command. And correct me if I'm wrong, in the military, you wake up in the morning, you know who answers to you, you know what their job is, you know what your job is, and you know who you answer to, and you know what their job is. So every day you wake up and you know your marching orders. And then, and I think that's the one thing that the civilian world has to learn from the military.
Yeah, and I think that when vets are getting out, and I used to do and work in some job training and deal for vets getting out, and I used to see these infantry guys. They get out and they're like, "Oh man, I don't know, I don't have any skills." I'm like, "Shut up! Like you do. You have leadership. You know what it takes, and you know how to be on time. And when you apply those two things, you can succeed in what you're doing. You can be an idiot. You can not be the best at everything, but if you do those things, you'll rise to the top."
Showing up is 80% of the job. Give me a guy that shows up on time.
And 80% of the workforce doesn't show up on time.
Give me a guy that shows up on time and is motivated. Mm-hmm. Give me one over 20 dudes that aren't motivated and you're not 100% certain they're going to be there. I'll take 1 over 20 any day of the week.
And you look at companies like, I'll give you an example. I mean, USAA. It's a great company. They're based in San Antonio. And they love hiring veterans. They love getting in Army guys and Air Force guys, and they get those officers because they've got that leadership, and they've got guys that are smart enough to make some cutting edge decisions on other things, and then they've got these guys that are good enough leaders to be able to follow through that. Because I think a lot of the part about being a leader is you have to have a long-term focus, right? Because all kinds of bad crap happens in the short term, but you have to stay the course.
Yeah, you don't quit when it gets tough.
Yeah, and you can't have knee-jerk reactions to change your mind because you're going to have ups and downs. So, if we say, hey, we're going to do this, not everything's going to go smooth. We can't abandon the project just because, something didn't happen.
Yeah, no trial lasts forever. It's interesting, you going through life. Like, I got a IRS, I had a mega audit 5 years ago or so. And I was like, oh my God, man. Like, just put in perspective how big it was. It cost me $4,000 just to get my documents shipped to my accountant. So it took, I think, 9.5, 10 months. Massive. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to paralyze me. Like, I'm not going to be able to get anything else done. And next thing I know, it was over, So hopefully I don't get audited ever again. But if I do, I've been through that. It's not that difficult. But the interesting thing, with regards to the military, leadership skills begin at, like, where would you say they start in the military? So, like, does a private or a private first class or, a corporal or whatever, like, the leadership skills there, like, the leadership begins early on in the military, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. Early in the military, you're kind of broken down and you're kind of taught how to follow. And then once that happens, even in those little groups, hey, this is how to lead. But to be able to lead, you do have to understand how to follow. And then I think to lead effectively, you have to understand how followers want to be led. So, is yelling at people all the time the best way to lead?
No.
Probably not.
Right.
Do you need to yell sometimes? Well, every once in a while, unfortunately, you do. But, you're put into situations that the rest of the world can never understand. So, when you're in that situation where you're leading and maybe you're having to help, patch up a guy that's just lost his leg in an IED, well, then when you get into this situation where something happens bad in manufacturing and everybody's freaking out.
Yeah, orders aren't shipping on time.
Yeah,
you can handle it.
You can sit there and go, okay, guys, we need to calm down, take a breath. Nobody's going to die here. We'll figure this out.
I've seen worse.
Yeah. There's worse things that could happen.
Right. Paul, you look like you have a couple questions.
I do. Tell me, earlier when we started, you made a comment, and I want you to expand on that, but you said that a bad decision is better than indecision, or something to that effect, right?
Well, no, indecision is worse than a bad decision.
Correct. Sorry. Tell me about that. You made a reference to CQB, but tell me more about that. I thought it was really, really, really smart, and I thought I liked it.
When we got into Iraq, I mean, scouts were supposed to be doing something completely different, so they started running us through CQB training and, close quarters battle and urban combat was going to be the way we were going forward. So I was lucky enough to be one of the ones that got to do all this, and then I was supposed to train my guys. And one thing that really stuck with me was the message that my instructors had through all of our training. It was a constant focus on indecision is worse than a bad decision in this situation. Well, really in any combat situation. And to explain that, you make a bad decision, well, then you can always make a good decision to correct that, or the guy behind you can. But indecision paralyzes everybody behind you. It paralyzes your company. And I see that more in business happening. It's crazy how much I see that happening. And so I constantly go back to these lessons from CQB and you have to think, you come in that fatal funnel, that doorway, and the point man just stands there. Well, one, you're allowing your enemy to gain positioning, to gain leverage, to do everything. Two, nobody can help you. So when they gain leverage and position, then when you come in the room, they can just shoot you one by one. The whole thing about CQB and MOUT, when you come in, you have to flood the room. It has to be a flow. And our operators are so good at that. They go left, right, and everybody does it all at the same time. Well, let's say I'm supposed to go right. We plan it all. Well, I mess up and I go left. Well, then my number two can simply flow right. I mean, we can just flood that room and still accomplish our goals, even though I messed up. And I think that has probably been the most important lesson that I've gotten the most traction out of in business, because decision paralyzes people.
I agree.
It does. It freaking, they don't want to make the decision. They don't want to do this, that. Well, you got to make the decision. You got to have the confidence to make the decision. And you got to have the confidence and to say, hey, and throw your ego out of the room. If you were wrong, we'll go make the decisions to correct your wrong. But I have seen so many projects fail and so many things fail simply because people were paralyzed to make a decision.
Interesting. It's interesting hearing, you've seen all levels. You were E6, right, a staff sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So you've led, you've followed, and everything in between. I think about this sometimes. I'd like to think I would say highly motivated is my style, but oftentimes people that you're working with, or you're working, either in your business or in something else, like I've struggled with people not being as motivated as I was, if that makes sense.
Oh, it drives me crazy.
So I guess I would ask is, how do you convince someone to do something that they don't want to do? Even though it's their job, you know what I mean? But your brain is saying, well, this is what we have to do. This is our job, so we're going to go crush this. But some people don't operate that way. And, maybe it's not in your company, but it's a vendor you're working with or something. Like, for me, that's always a struggle. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I know a vendor. I'm thinking of a vendor right now that we're talking about, and they don't get it. And I think, I can't go in there like a drill sergeant and, you will buy this. Like, that doesn't work. But you have to be able to explain the entire facet. And I think when you can do that and you can sit back and say, look, because I'll tell you with swagger, I mean, we get this all the time. People are like, oh my God, it's bulky. Is it really? Is that just a perception? And when you can actually have that conversation, be like, well, the product that you're talking about only weighs 2 ounces less. And you're saying that our product is so much heavier. And I think when you just have those real conversations sometimes, so you can be calm, cool, and collective. Because, I mean, it's not like being under fire in Iraq, but you're under fire. But perception, it gets... Stuff gets so misconstrued all the time. You just have to be able to stay cool and then talk people through it and say, look, and we go back. So I'm a scout, right? What do I got to report? The 5 W's. You know, who, what, why, when, where. And that's what I tell people. Like, communicate those things to somebody when they don't understand or they're pissed off at you. And most of the time that can diffuse the situation and actually get you forward.
Excellent. Tell us about Big and J and Swagger. Tell us how that got started. Lead us into that.
Well, Big and J is a deer feed, and Swagger is a bipod company and shooting sticks that we have now. And really, I got to know those guys when I was vice president over at Texas Trophy Hunters and producer for the TV show. They were our sponsors. And I got to know those guys real well. We did a lot of advertising for them. And, once they bought this patent for Swagger, that's when Aaron Keller, he kind of came to me and he was like, man, what would you think about leaving? Because we need somebody to handle the marketing for all this. And, really the big selling point for me was like, we need you to take this. There'll be travel, but you can work from home. And, I've got 3 girls that, I love and have, so much fun with. Like, I can't even imagine my life without them, because I don't go hunting without them. I do everything with them, and they're awesome. And getting that ability to where if I get done with work early, I can go pick them up at 3:30. And so, when I started to think about that, that was a big pull for me. And of course, there was a lot of leeway that they needed some leadership and needed some, sort of some direction in a few things. And it really was a perfect fit. And I love where I'm at right now. We've got a TV show on Discovery Channel that I'm the executive producer of. And right now, what we're doing, I feel like we're doing some cutting edge things that there's a lot of bigger companies that aren't doing that. And now, granted, we are owned by some bigger companies. Mm-hmm. We're owned by the Dinsdales, Pinnacle Bank, Pinnacle Insurance, and then they're big in the cattle feed and whatnot. But everything that we do is calculated. On the animal nutrition side, we have 5. Let me try that again. Everything we do on the animal nutritionist side, we have 5 PhD ruminant nutritionists. So we test all of our products out, and we want them to be not only attractant, to bring deer in, but they're going to be highly nutritious, and they're going to, in the end, it's just like the long game. I can attract deer on short term all the time, but on the long term, if I'm filling a deer's belly and I'm teaching a deer, hey, look how many more nutritious, look how much more energy you have when you eat this. Well, then that's going to be a much better long-term solution for me.
Interesting. Earlier we talked about branding a little bit and your background in writing. I guess it's my opinion, but I'd be curious your thoughts on it, that a lot of, I don't want to say brands, but we'll say maybe campaigns that get sideways or something ultimately come down to this brand thing. And like, the more I've looked into things kind of forensically, it seems like people lose like the authenticity of it, right? It's a pretty powerful qualifier. And I find that, the industry's got a ton of agencies and a ton of people, but at the end of the day, if you can take a person that's reasonably intelligent, that shows up on time, that's quasi-motivated, and is an end user of the product that you represent, you can be successful. So I guess talk a little bit about anybody listening. There's a lot of people out there that I think would be really good at doing the things we're talking about. But maybe talk to listeners about that thing, like taking the step and saying, you know what, I do know these things. Like, this is my world I live in. I think about this every day. I have something to offer.
Absolutely. So let's think about that, right? Because part of leadership and part of leading is listening and understanding. And so part of my job is I have to understand my consumer. I have to listen to them. You know who didn't do a real good job of that lately? Gillette.
True story. Hashtag
Okay.
current news.
All right. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, Baker just woke up. He was like, "Oh yeah."
No,
got Baker's attention.
Wow, I can't agree with you more on that one.
So we got to listen to our consumers, right? I mean, and so what Gillette's telling me, you know, I can't imagine that boardroom that was sitting around being like, "This is going to sell razors," and you know, you have to think about these things that, and we could go through. There's all kinds of other companies. I'll give you. Wow, I don't want to get too political, but
hold on, it wasn't a board level decision. It was a CMO level decision. They probably had a
Steered poorly by an agency.
Agencies,
that would be my guess.
Agencies pitching this idea, and if you remove the current political environment, and this is just an example of a poor a message delivered poorly at a poor time. Like, they didn't need to make it the commercial. It served no purpose. All it did was make people angry.
yeah, and so that's
They
what we
weren't
said.
in tune with their consumer. They were listening to the echoes of social media. It's like, this was months and months and months and months ago. Like, there's none of that talk going on now. It's absurd.
And so my job as a marketing director is to, like, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what my political beliefs are. What matters to me is, and my longevity in this job is how to speak to the consumer. So if I continue to not listen to the consumer, you know, and Gillette it all day long, then we're not going to get anywhere. And so I constantly have to listen, and I look at the analytics because, okay, as a scout, if I apply more Army stuff here, you know, I'm the eyes and ears of the battlefield. Well, that's what I feel like I am right now to my company. I look at Google Analytics. I watch. I sort of catalog social media responses. I do all this stuff to create an intel folder to say, hey, look, this is what we're hearing. This is what the needs are. This is what we're doing wrong. And this is what we're doing right. So, you know, in any mission, you have all these like, oh, what are we going to sustain? What are we going to eliminate? And I think that's just all part of leadership to what we're going to do. And, you know, all those things that we're talking about, your regular E5 infantry guy knows how to do all that stuff, right? So all it is listening to intel, listening to everything that's happening, and then being able to format a response.
It's mission success for the team, which is what guys in the mill learn. Accomplish the mission. I think you run into a lot of. It's interesting you mentioned that, because there's a lot of guys that I know in this industry, marketing guys, that maybe fancy themselves as a professional photographer, or maybe have a background in photography or whatever, and they put images, media, things like that out based on how they feel that their peers will view it, versus
Look,
what the consumer wants. It's not what you think is right, and it's not what your photography buddies thinks is going to be a great photo. The only thing that matters is feeding the beast. And Logan and I talked about it on a previous podcast. The consumer is all that matters, and that's the only thing that matters.
I had a professor, and he used to. He was a creative writing professor, Dr. Waggy, and his thing he used to always say was, when you wrote stuff, get rid of your little ditties, okay? And what happens is a lot of times you get these favorite photographs and you get these other things that you think are, man, this is the coolest picture of Swagger. This is oh yeah, people are going to love it. But when you go look at it and you analyze it from all the other ads that were out, most of the time, the picture you hated most that you put on those Facebook or Google ads, that's the one that consumers are responding to. And so you have to just kind of look at it, go, okay, well, that's the one they want, and don't fight it, because I see other marketing. No. The consumers don't know what they're talking about. They really want this picture.
Hey, hold on.
This is the one.
And the consumer may not know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. That's true, but the consumer knows what they want, mm-hmm. and it's your job to give them what they want. There's campaign marketing.
Again, it's just listening, and listening is part of leadership. It's an integral piece of it.
Interacting and engaging with the consumer, because if there's certain companies out there, if you look at their social media platforms, they don't engage with the consumer. They don't respond. Mm-hmm. They don't talk to them. But what happens, dude, when a person tags your brand in a photo and you like or you engage or you repurpose it, repost it, if it's a good photo, that's how you create lifelong brand advocates. Because a guy may be buying your product, but the moment he posts a photo of it on social media and that company likes his posts and comments on it, dude, you got a brand advocate. And that's how you got micro influencers and macro influencers.
But you want on your social media to basically get those consumers to where if somebody does come on something, you've got all these other protectors that come and say, oh, well, you weren't doing this or you weren't doing that. And
talked about that about 35 minutes ago.
And I think that
that's your first line of defense, man. Mm-hmm. Is your consumer. And when you get your social media pages primed to where your consumers take ownership in the brand, and let's say someone who's in a bad mood comes on there and has nothing better to do but talk shit, you don't have to defend yourself. You never want to defend your brand. You want your consumers to defend your brand for you. And that's, I think, especially what I do on social media with the brands that I work with, that's step one, is engaging with existing consumers and empowering them and letting them have a sense of brand ownership.
Well, and what I train, the guys that work for me is like, social media is supposed to be a conversation, right? So we've got to be able to, we got to have a conversation. If I'm just talking to you and I'm not responding, oh, hey, Josh, what do you mean by that? Well, then that's not a conversation. And, this has changed so much from, before I was in the Army. I mean, there wasn't social media when I was in marketing and advertising before. But it's you just have to have these conversations. You have to listen. I can't reiterate whether you're listening to the consumer or you're listening to Google Analytics or whatever it is. You have to listen. And it's the same thing with the battlefield. I mean, you have to look at what's going on out there. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But I've got a lot of guys that I know that didn't think that they had the abilities to perform in the job that they were performing, and mm-hmm. Because they use these principles that they know were the right thing to do, they're excelling in their jobs right now and doing very good.
I worked in law enforcement for a long time before I took a step out, and for me, I want to talk quickly about the word marketing. So marketing to me is like the word Asia. Asia's a big place, and marketing is a big thing,
it really
right?
Is.
So I guess I think marketing's kind of all encompassing, and there's a lot of aspects of it. But for somebody that's listening, they might think, this marketing thing sounds good. I was that guy, or I think I can do that. I like this stuff. I know people. Maybe I can. I didn't know anything really, but marketing seemed to be my thing. So tell me, or I guess tell our listeners about, what is the day-to-day responsibilities? Like, what's your role look like as a marketing director? Like, what is that job?
Here's what I think about marketing and social media and all that, right? Mm-hmm. The moment it's kind of like women in the ocean. Like, I've got a great wife. The moment that I think that I know what my wife is going to do, and I turn my back to her or the ocean, what happens to me?
Bad news.
I get flattened.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm kind of at a higher position. I've done a lot of things. I think you'd be surprised to know that when I'm on flights, I take Facebook Blueprint classes. Like, it's 15-minute classes. I constantly read. You know, I'm constantly taking Google AdWords classes. You have to, things are changing at such a rate right now. You can't just sit back and go, hey man, I'm good. And I know a few guys who were really good at doing this stuff 5 years ago, and they thought they had it, and now they're obsolete. So I think you always have to be open to learning more and doing more, because right now there's a great advertising book that I read in college, and I still reread every once in a while, and it was written in 1981, and the opening sentence is talking about how we're an over-communicated society. So when he wrote that in 1981, he had no idea what over-communicated even meant.
Yeah, it's gone next level now.
I mean, we're now. Yeah. I mean, what would we be? 1,000,000 times more over-communicated than 1981?
Easily, I don't know.
I don't know. So I think that you've always got to be willing to learn and move, and you know, I can think of these agencies that, and even rep groups that are just like, no, this is the way it's done. This is what. No, you have to be able to be fluid and move through, you know, whatever it is. And you know, what was it the Israeli general said? You know, something like, you know, I'm going to screw this up totally, but you know, a hammer is a great tool, but not every problem is a nail.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as things kind of progress and we go, you just have to be able, because this was a long-winded answer to your question, but you know, you think about when you asked about that, let's talk about digital marketing. 10 years ago, we all knew what that meant. That meant banner ads and maybe an email. Now digital marketing, holy crap, like
multiple departments.
It's a division.
I mean,
it's more than one department now.
Yeah, you're talking, I mean, there's, I don't know, 100 different avenues that we can talk about.
Paul says about fishing. You know, like I look at the space we work in, you know, outdoor hunting, firearms. We were hunting on the way to Kansas, and I got a PhD in fishing from Paul in about 9 hours, maybe.
9 hours.
9-hour drive. But Paul says, fish conditions, don't fish memories. I caught me a big old bass under that tree a couple years ago. That doesn't mean fuck all. Fish the conditions, don't fish the memories.
Absolutely.
So if you look at, you have to evolve, and that's one of the things that I have to fight tooth and nail with my clients is like, oh yeah, you know, we got these, you know, print ads. You know, we're on this great spread. And it's like, I'll give you $100 bill if you can tell me the last magazine ad you remember. I have no clue.
Yeah. Or can you measure the ROI on that? Can you measure the return on investment?
Let's go a step further, man. To hell with ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Can you measure shit off that magazine ad? No. The only thing you know is how many issues that publication tells you they ship out. Mm-hmm. That's all you know. With digital, like there's programs out there, man, that can tell you where people's mouses go. Like you can track where the mouse goes on a computer screen, what people follow. So if you don't adapt, and I personally think this industry is very slow to adapt, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
I would agree.
It's not a bad thing. They're not reactionary. It takes time, which is fine. If you can't adapt and you can't make changes, like let's say you're a big shot in the military, you know, tier 1 dude or whatever, and if you're not willing to get out and start over or do what you're required to do, like you're going to be behind the 8 ball. Same with what I do. If I'm not willing, every day it changes. The algorithm on Instagram, the algorithm on Facebook, it is changing. Every week it changes. And you don't know. And you have to stay on top of that. And you can't be complacent. Like I think that's one of the biggest things in the space that I work in is this complacency where people just sit on their butts. Oh man, we've been running the same ad, man. It killed it. It's like, yeah, no shit, it killed it. But every time you run that same ad or you make that same post, there's a marker that goes on that, and it's now flagged as a duplicate post. So it's going to get hammered.
Even past that, the consumer just gets tired of it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like, if I get one more of those TikTok ads in my Facebook feed, I think I'm going to, shove a pencil in my eye.
I had to ask Dave
Like,
about that.
I mean, do y'all get those? Am I the only one?
I get 'em.
But,
So 4 hours ago, I was laying on the bed in the room, and I looked up at Dave and went, hey, man, the fuck's this TikTok shit? And he looked up at me from his computer, and he explained it, and I was like, oh, okay. And for me, so I look at things like this. It's like I personally have no interest in it as a human being, as a consumer. However, then I went, well, this is freaking absurd. I have no interest in this. And I went, wait a minute. How can I manipulate this new tool to work for me? So now I've got to go learn some other platform.
I think as a whole, we're kind of, I certainly speak for myself, but I think we're advertising adverse. We get hit so much. And now with like pixel tracking, all these things, it's like I can't escape. And it seems like for me, like I resonate as a marketer with something with a little visual and narrative focus. And I feel like they understand my thing, whether it's hunting or shooting or fishing or golf or whatever. Like I resonate with that. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it goes back to what you talked about in the beginning, was like being a good writer, being able to tell that story is super important. Being a person.
People don't want to do things with a corporation. They want to deal with the people.
They don't want to be sold. So go look at go for those listening. Go to your I hate to use this term, but go to someone that you would describe as an influencer or someone that is paid to promote a certain brand, and look at the likes on an organic post from them doing something, playing with their kids at the park or riding in their truck or whatever, and then go look at a post that a company that pays them told them to publish. You're looking at probably 10 to 20% tops of engagement. So all the influencers I work with are like, hey, man, what do you want me to say? And I was like, I don't know how to speak to your consumer, your fans. Write whatever you want. Say it however you want to say it, but make it genuine. Don't try to sell anyone anything. Just make the post. Whereas most people, like influencers I work with, the other companies they work with, they will give them the verbiage. And it's not their language. It's not
like
how they speak.
being sold a used car,
or even worse, being sold a new car that you can afford. Mm-hmm. Those guys are the most aggressive. Used car salesman deals with a different individual. Like imagine going and trying buying a Ferrari or Lamborghini. Think of the load of shit those guys throw at you.
Oh, I can
and the
only
ass
imagine
kissing.
Josh has a Lamborghini.
No, I do not.
If any of you in San Antonio
I have a beat up Silverado truck.
If any of you in San Antonio see a silver Lamborghini going down the road with Big and J, that's Josh. Honk at him twice.
2 honks.
And he'll give you a free bag of stuff.
It's encouraging too, I think, for everyone listening. Josh, you mentioned it earlier, is we're complaining a little bit about advertising and stuff, but the truth is we have more information now at our fingertips than we've ever had in our life. So you have the ability, if you're a guy or gal that's like, I want to get into this thing, I could spend the next 10 days and never leave YouTube and get more knowledge about whatever it is I want to do, marketing or manufacturing or anything it may be.
My daughter
get it.
watches YouTube and she has these 5-minute hacks. She gets Barbie clothes that she makes out of balloons. It's amazing. We had at the
it's empowering,
NSSF, we had this guy, the speaker that came, and he was talking about, he wanted to take his kids to all these baseball games, and they were so into computers, and he was just trying to get them out, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to go to baseball games. And he's like, oh, great. And he's like, yeah, there's this guy we follow, this YouTuber, and he does math, and he figures out where the best probability for a foul ball comes in each ballpark. And
that's awesome.
And he's sitting here so they're all excited. Well, they wanted to get to the park, the kids, 4 hours early so they could see this guy. This was the guy. And now, if you talk to kids now, they don't want to be a baseball player. Well, I mean, I'm just saying on a general, but they want to be a YouTuber. And I mean,
sure.
my oldest daughter's 7. She wants to go to California because her favorite horse YouTuber that talks about riding horses is from California.
How old is she?
7.
That'll change in a couple years.
So she
Don't worry right now. It'll change.
But she watches and she comes up with these acts like, I'm not kidding. She makes bikinis for her Barbies out of balloons and all this stuff. And it's really wild to watch. Like even my kids, they get on YouTube and they get this knowledge and they'll come to me and they're like, hey, Dad, is it true that, crocodiles have to swallow rocks because they can't? And I'm like, what?
Let me Google that real quick, son.
Daddy's
got to go into the bathroom. Let me Google that.
Google made everyone a
but
genius.
It is, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm a huge college football fan. I'm a Virginia Tech Hokie fan, and I have to have knowledge about what's going on in my team and recruiting. Because I can't get enough information.
Yeah. So we're in the age of the consumer, and I'm a diehard Dogs fan, and I follow it every day because it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. Which is something you pointed on earlier. Being in the military, guys in the mill, law enforcement, whatever. Like just because you think you're doing one thing one day doesn't mean it's going to change. Like Evan says, you can change your plan as fast as you can change your underwear. And I think it's a strong message to take away.
But also, you have to be, if you're fluid and you have that ability and you have that mindset, there are opportunities that come up that take that ability to look at it, make a decision, and look at it and go, let's go after that.
Absolutely.
If not, you watch those opportunities go by. So when you can stay fluid in your mind like that and be ready to make a decision, and it's okay to fail every once in a while.
Be available. So, for everyone listening, Josh, where can they find you?
Oh, Lord. Well, I hope nobody finds me. But
digitally, where are you located?
So we've Big and J and Swagger. I'm a true believer in content. So we've got shootwithconfidencetv.com. We also have it all on YouTube and Roku for all of our Swagger content. And then for Big and J, we call it feedthehunt.com, and that's on the same YouTube, Swagger, whatnot. Our TV show, The Give and Ride, is on Discovery Channel. It's also being syndicated in a bunch of regional sports networks. But, gosh, I forgot one of the biggest places, Amazon Prime. You can go find us on there. And, if you'll go and you'll watch that content, you'll watch kind of what we talked about tonight. It's, I'm not trying to beat you over the head with a stick. I think that's what a lot of people think, is that advertising is hitting you over the head with his hammer.
I've seen stuff. You're just trying to tell a story.
And I believe that advertising and marketing is filling up small rooms. This is not my thing. From one of my old advertising lessons, but filling up small rooms with fog. The more fog in that room, the more likely that consumer is to make a conversion. Awesome. And you add to that fog with content, with personality, with lifestyle.
There you have it, folks. For Baker Leavitt, Josh Kinser, and Paul Bort, this is Launch Code.